Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks.
The drum chair and he who sits in it. A barrelhouse of polkas, stripper gigs, game shows, jingles, and soundtracks. It's about feel. The terms that have come about are nothing more than playing behind, in front, or on the beat. When my guest hit the studio scene, he was ingratiated by Earl Palmer, who was feeling the groove to many grooves, in fact, that he recommended my guest to all the producers, like Phil Spector, who hired jazzers like Conte Condoli, Plas Johnson, Pete Jolly, and my guest. Baja Marimba, Psychedelic Percussion, Three's Company, Come and Knock on My Door, Dawg Grass with David Grisman, Stone Jazz gigs with Howard Roberts and Tommy Tedesco, playing Dee Dee's Dilemma and into a little bosses, into a little ballad, into a funky blues. My guest felt his way through the music because he knows that songs tell a story and the drums have to envelop that story. Some stories are happy or sad. Some speak to regions of our country. Some don't make sense at all. Some stories go on for decades with the same performers like John Lennon, and others were just a one-shot deal. My guest is a master drummer, just like Elvin Jones, Joe Jones, Philly Joe Jones, and Benny Benjamin. He is the most recorded studio drummer in the history of modern recorded music. He's given others opportunities because not all enter from the same entrance. Hal Blaine, an honor to welcome you to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thanks, Jake. My goodness, you said it all.
I don't think I said much of anything, actually, but Hal, I found an album the other week in a Goodwill for $1. It was this Tommy Tedesco album, and I've been listening to it every night with my kids. It's the guitars of Tommy Tedesco. It's not one you see that much, and it's you and Emil Richards and Pete Jolly, and there's a tune on there called Dee Dee's Dilemma. It is the most smoking bop, hard bop. It's not even bop. It's hard. It's swinging so hard, Blaine. And then I'm like looking at your credits, and I'm like, this guy's the most recorded drummer in history, but your cradle was jazz, and I just wanted you to talk to the audience about the jazzers that you came of age with and just how much you loved that music when it was popular music.
Well, when I was a kid growing up, obviously I got hooked on drums at about age 12, 13, and I knew I wanted to be, and my goal was to become a drummer. And of course, I followed that through all the years of my military, and schooling, etc., etc. So it really all happened for me. But the thing that I was listening to, of course, was Dizzy Gillespie, that I was fortunate enough to sit in with at one time and jam and get his autograph. Dizzy Gillespie, and there were a few other guys around at the time, unknown names. Blinky Allen, great drummer, became a great friend.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of all these other drummers. There were so many great drummers that kind of put their arm around me and saw me as this white kid coming along and playing jazz, along with so many of the jazzers. And jazz was my first love. I was fortunate enough back in the 50s to be on the Count Basie band. Sonny Payne was a dear friend. That's way too long a story to go into. But here I was working with all these great jazz players who just basically were musicians. They happened to fall into the jazz genre. And in my case, I was young enough and maybe wise enough to realize, after hanging with a lot of these people, that there was no real payoff in the jazz world. I don't care how big you got, how wonderful you played, how much independent coordination you had, and how many wild things you could do. I was lucky enough as a youngster to find my niche, which happened to be as an accompanist. And because I was working with various dance dancers, singers, entertainers, they all seem to say, you know, Hal, you've got a certain touch for my music or my act or whatever, and you're a great accompanist, and I really appreciate it. Well, of course, I appreciated it too, and it kind of set me in the direction of being an accompanist. And I think wherever I turned, you know, I was lucky enough to become an accompanist. And just to show the jazz thing, that I wasn't very far off. And I played with a lot of the great jazz players. And it was Miles, and I believe it was Miles Davis who made this famous quote. He was on an interview, and the interviewer said, Mr. Davis, could you tell me what really lured you into jazz? And Miles Davis said, I hated crowds.
What did he say?
I hated crowds. C-R-O-W-D-S. And it was the truth, because, you know, you could go to, because I was a kid, I was going to jazz clubs and trying to fit in with a lot of these jazz greats. And these people were, the people that were sitting there ordered one drink all night. They paid a certain, probably a cover to get in. And they just sat there snapping on 1 and 3, which was really verboten. And they're jazz fans. And they couldn't care for any other kind of music. They just loved jazz. Well, you know, there's a lot of wonderful stories about the jazz players. And you hear all this stuff as you grow up. I mean, we just lost two of my very favorite people. It was Robin Williams, and of course, the gal that just died.
Oh, Joan Rivers.
Joan Rivers,
yeah,
of course.
Of course, yeah.
And she was, they were so sharp. People don't realize how fast they were.
I know.
So sharp.
Right.
And I don't put myself at all in the category of Robin Williams or Joan, but I kind of grew up listening to them, and privately thinking I'd love to accompany them sometimes, and I never really did. And yet they were just so great to listen to and so wonderful. And comedy became my second major. I love music, but I loved comedy. And I was lucky enough to, when I was at Hollywood, to start working as an actor at Paramount, and I got to meet an awful lot of great actors and great people in the business. And, that all led to and contributed to my luck falling into what I call a vat of chocolate. I'm seriously.
No. How? Because I think I just want to go back because you really taking me on a trip here, but I wanted you to go back and because like Keltner, for instance, I mean, he acknowledges you put him on the hot seat, you gave him a break. I consider Keltner of a certain generation. You're actually one of the cats that you're almost. Can you talk about the first generation drummers that put their arm around you? I don't care how unsung a hero they are, but I mean, what those guys did to embolden you to believe in humanity and to believe in what you said as an accompanist, because that value is missing in society now. The ability to get. The ability to be able to be comfortable by being an accompanist is not good enough. Everyone has to have an agenda. That's part of what my show is about. So I was hoping you could just talk about that, your philosophy on that, and then some of those first generation cats and other cats like DJ Fontana. Anybody any guys that aren't here anymore that you want to pay tribute to?
Well, DJ is still here, and he's a very dear friend.
Oh man, I didn't know that.
And we were both with Elvis was always there because he was Elvis's drummer.
Right.
And one of the nicest guys in the world. Just a sweetheart. You know, I tell the same thing about Dennis Wilson, the Beach Boys drummer.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis was he played, he was the epitome of a rock and roll surfer boy with the blonde hair, and the girls were nuts about him, probably more crazy about him than anyone in the Beach Boys. And yet I was doing the Beach Boys records. I mean, it was an amazing thing, and they were all good friends.
Right.
And they loved that I was doing the records because, aside from the fact that we knew they were going to be hits, I mean, there's obviously.
Oh, my.
Dennis and I were very dear friends, and they asked him many times, doesn't it upset you that Hal was doing records? And he'd say, no, because Dennis was out on his boat, his motorcycle, his hot rods, his surfboard. He was the epitome of a surfer. And we loved the fact that he could do what he wanted, and I've said it many times. While I was in the studio making 35, 40 hours for the afternoon, Dennis that night was on stage making, who knows, 30,000.
That is a very, so the overarching philosophical point there is really powerful, Hal. That's incredible.
Well, it's absolutely true, and the people that helped me when I was coming along as a youngster, and now I have Jimmy Keltner, I have Jimmy Gordon, all these folks that were coming along next to me or behind me or in front of me. They all became very dear friends, and I was very happy to help them, just as Earl Palmer helped me, and H.B. Barnum, one of the great arrangers, who's not that well known, but he was one of the incredible guys that came along during the late 50s and grabbed hold of me and put me with people like Sam Cooke. And, here I was the only white guy working with Sam Cooke. And when somebody would ask, how come we're using a white guy? H.B. Barnum would say, you better listen to this white guy because this is where it's at. I mean...
No, I know a cat who plays piano with H.B. Barnum at their church every Sunday. I got to get that. Cal Bessemer is a great jazz piano player, plays with him at his church. Yeah, I really think that you got dumped into a vat of chocolate, but you were the right cat to do it because a lot of other cats get dunked in there, but they implode. You were able to maintain.
The problem was a lot of the guys. When I came along at the right, it's just that old saying, location, location, location. I came along at a time when so many of the great jazz, in quotes, jazz players, studio players, but the guys that I call the Blue Blazers.
Yeah.
I came along, wearing Levi's and T-shirts at a time when the filthy word rock and roll just wouldn't be accepted by anybody. But I said, hey, playing drums is playing drums. And part of it was the fact that I was working as an actor, and I kind of considered myself a method drummer. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I saw some of the great method actors, and what was their motivation for a scene? And what was my motivation when I got lucky in the studios was the song. Mm. And to me, when I do clinics today, I ask the kids, what is a song? They don't really know. Well, a song is a song, and it's a love song, or it's a funny song, or it's a sad song. A song is a story. And that's the whole point. That story is going to tell me what I should be playing. Now, maybe that's something that's built into my brain. I don't know. Maybe because I worked as an actor, I needed motivation. Well, my main motivation was playing my drums. I just wanted to play drums.
but you were just riffing on something there. I think that's the issue today, one of the issues that's going on in the times now is that, okay, you have to be able to tell a story. If there are no messages in the songs, then it's just noise.
Exactly.
So we become the music has been made for pacification. I see it with my daughters. I mean, they still get a relentless amount of Dee Dee's Dilemma, and they get a relentless amount of these European cats who are playing, blues, late 60s blues, the Crusaders, all Hal Blaine everywhere, but they're still addicted to noise. And that's what kids hear these days. There are no messages in the music. I mean, obviously, it's going to take self-confident people that are also brave to get out and actually tell a story. But you have to have a story to tell, Hal, and that's the point.
Well, that's very true. And of course, I find today that, or I should say, every genre of music that has come along through my lifetime, it's always been the fans. The fans grab onto something that they like. Mm-hmm. The 40s happened to be all the big bands, all the great bands. I grew up with all these great bands. There wasn't one band that I did not know the arrangement to their music. I don't care if it was from Guy Lombardo to Stan Kenton. Mm-hmm. I knew every drum lick. Wow. Because that's what turned me on, because everybody around me was turned on by that, and that was sort of the thing to do. And so when I was asked to play rock and roll, of course I'm going to play rock and roll. I tried to tell these kids, I went from working in nightclubs, 7 nights a week most of the time, and you were lucky if you made $80 or $90. Really wasn't enough to completely, take care of yourself, let alone a family, which I did not have at the time. But the fact was that after making, $80, $90 a week, $100 a week if I was lucky, all of a sudden I started working in studios and I was making $1,000 a day. Now, how can you say that's not falling into a vat of chocolate? My goodness, I mean, it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me was getting in and we started with demos, me and Glenn Campbell and Tommy Tedesco and Leon Russell. Ray Pullman was always on bass. These guys were just wonderful nightclub musicians.
Who was on bass?
Guys.
Who was on bass?
Pardon?
Who was on bass?
Ray Pullman.
I want something really caught my attention, and I wanted you to expand on this for the audience. You said when Earl Palmer was overwhelmed with work, and he tipped off. He said, give this guy Blaine a chance, and you said at the time he was playing rock and roll, which was, how did you put it? It was just a feeling. It was a feeling, Hal. Can you talk about? Can you talk?
They called it rhythm and blues in the early days, and most of the fellas that I call the three-piece suitors or the blue blazer guys, they're all graduates of these amazing institutions, and they could literally, and excuse the expression that you may have to bleep it, but they could read fly shit off of a piece of paper.
Right.
That's how good they were. And if you ever turn on a symphony orchestra and look at some of these things on PBS and so forth, you will see players that are playing music. They're playing more notes than anybody ever heard of. And they're good at it because that's their thing. They grew up doing it. They studied it. They all have PhDs. It goes on and on and on. The point is, when I came along, I was happy to play that music. These people did not frighten me because they didn't know that I was a graduate of a music school. They didn't know of my background, my growing up and being an accompanist. I go back to Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus in 1954, I think it was, or 55, when they had the fire, and I was at the fire in Hartford, Connecticut. They didn't know about my transition into strip clubs as a kid before I ever went to school.
Right.
I was working with all these dancers and strippers and comedians and burlesque acts. I was working at Minsky's Theater in Chicago. I was working at the Post Time Club in Chicago. I was working during a period getting my basic training from any drummer that I could see or watch or hear on records. And in those days, there was only radio. And I was listening to radio constantly. I mean, that was my best friend. And I knew every record, every hit record. I knew what the top 100 were, on and on and on. Never realized that I would really get to that point myself. But, fortunately, I did. And fortunately, the word gets around. And when, I started calling our little group the Wrecking Crew.
Right.
Because they didn't... The composers, we were working for the greatest composers. When you mention Henry Mancini, when you mention Johnny, oh God, I can't even think of all their names. Some of the great film composers who started using us.
Neil Hefti? Neil Hefti, of course.
Yep. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Right.
Johnny Mandel. I mean, all these incredible people. And incredible songwriters like Burt Bacharach and his partner and the guys that Neil Diamond, all these people that came out of what they call Team Panelli, and Phil Spector, and on and on and on. I mean, people wanted that same group. Who are these guys making these hit records? And of course, the word got around. It was like wildfire. That's the Wrecking Crew. And I was lucky enough to be part of the Wrecking Crew. And my secretary happened to own the answering service for all the musicians in L.A. and Hollywood at the time. And she just started booking every date that I wanted to do. I mean, if you were paying me enough money to be with you, I'll be making your records. I won't be with Bobby Helfer at Universal Pictures making $35, $45, $60 for 3 hours when I can be working on a record and making $365 for 3 hours. I mean, it was just, these guys were coming after us, just like all of the producers that were coming from Spain, from Ireland, from France, Germany, Italy, all over Europe, England, all of these great artists. Petula Clark, whoever thought I would be working with some of the great artists from England? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Working with Peter and Gordon and all of these famous acts that,
But hold on. But I'll be honest with you. I want to go back to this thing, the Brian Wilson thing. I want to be clear. You played drums on those tracks, but when the album came out, the accompanists did not get credit on the album.
Well, the thing was, nobody ever did, and they didn't do it purposely. It's just that the record companies just never did it.
But what I'm saying is, it's going back to this idea of only you in yourself. Nobody asked you if you had a degree or not. They trusted that you could play drums. But the idea is that those records come out, you hear them on the radio, and only you know, truthfully, the band obviously, but you in your heart say, that's me on the radio. I got a session pay for that. But your name's... that today, I guess what I'm trying to say is the parallel today is the insecurity with younger generations is that would be unacceptable. Like, even for me, Hal, if I was playing, and I'm not a musician, but if I was drumming on an album that became a major hit, I'd at least want to receive credit. So to me, it's amazingly humble that you did that for thousands of records. Your name never... And then, of course, it started to come on. But for thousands...
We had a saying in those days.
Yeah.
It was very simple. Initials. PTMAR. Which was, does it upset you that your name is not on the album? I just want to take the money and run. And that's exactly what it was about. Set egos aside.
Right.
All of us drummers are big show-offs. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be, and then the guitar players came along, leaping all over the stages and playing as many notes as they can, let alone maybe they weren't even in the same chord. But whatever. It's what the kids grabbed onto. And my personal being was TTMAR. Take the money and run. Who cares if my name is on there? Well, eventually, there was a great drummer by the name of Bones Howell. And Bones alone, let alone was a great drummer, he became one of the great engineers and producers. And he was doing all the Fifth Dimension that we were doing, for an example, and getting these records, Grammy Records of the Year, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on. But Bones was the first guy to come along and start saying, listen, we're using background singers here. Why don't they get credits? The orchestras were not getting credits. I mean, our little bands or the wrecking crew, whatever. And Bones Howell was a member of NARAS, National Association of Recording Arts and Sciences. And at some of the meetings, he brought it up. And I still give all the credit to Bones Howell, because after Bones is when we started getting credits, individual credits on albums, sometimes on the end of movies even, because he just felt that we were knocking ourselves out, making these hit records and making all this money for all these people, thank goodness, including ourselves.
No, I think he was a progressive dude, smart as all get out, and you know what, an advocate. And I think that I mean, to me, the amount of albums that I don't buy because they don't list, all I do is collect vinyl, Hal. I mean, I don't listen to anything else, but I really almost refuse to buy albums sometimes if they don't list the accompanist, because then I have no background. I don't know but this one Tedesco album happened to name this.
I understand.
You dig that. I wanted to ask you about, there was a cat that I'm really hoping that you collaborated with, was Harry Parch.
Harry Parch. Where do I know that name from?
I want to know. I figured it would be a tangential thing, but it leads into my other question about this incredibly rare album that I've never found, and I'm hoping one day maybe I can grab a copy of Psychedelic Percussion, because Parch, which was your album, but Parch was this guy who fundamentally was going to, he was making all sorts of percussive instruments out of, beakers and science makers.
Oh, that's how I know that name.
And
sure.
so cats that played on Amel and Gary Coleman and and all, and so I'm like, Blaine must have somehow, because I know that, I'm just wondering, did you have, like, aside from being in the wrecking crew and just, doing sessions, did you have, like, a collaborative group of cats where you guys would just make instruments and play and see what would come? Like, isn't that what Psychedelic Percussion, the album, is really about? Can you talk about that album? Because it's...
I gotta be honest with the Psychedelic Percussion was strictly an idea that I had, just to get some percussionists together and make sounds. And we gave them the silliest astrological names. And that's what we did. And they were all head arrangements. We did what we felt at the time, and we took the money and ran. TTMAR. And that's what most of us, I'm serious, Jake, most of us were not stupid. I mean, we weren't, living in cars or anything like that. But all of a sudden, we were buying amazing estates, beautiful Rolls Royces, beautiful yachts. I mean, and we were accepted as some great musicians. And it took some time. I mean, when the word got out that we could, in fact, read music, that we could read arrangements, that we knew what we were doing. I mean, people like Walt Disney was hiring me, and ask for me. The guy at Paramount Pictures said, "Oh, we can't use actors. We have to use musicians." And it took a few heavyweight VIPs to convince Paramount that I was an actor, big deal, but I was a drummer. And then I joined Elvis. I mean,
wow.
I spent all those wonderful years with Elvis.
Wow.
And that whole, they call them the Memphis Mafia. Well, because some of them were Italian, but they weren't really Mafia.
Yeah.
They were musicians and hanger-outers, and that's what it was. They were friends of Elvis. I mean, that's a whole other book in itself. So, fortunately for me, I was thrilled to play rock and roll. I mean, rock and roll was an offshoot of rhythm and blues, R&B, which was so popular. There are shows. Dick Clark did 2 4-hour specials on me. I mean, which is unheard of, because he felt that we were guys that never got any credits. And, I mean, how sweet of the guy to do that. And the word, I mean, it went around the world. We get credits today from worldwide, from all the cities in Europe that play our records. We get credits for it. We also get a little taste of money from some of that stuff. So once again, we're taking the money and running. And people like, I made friendships like Brian Wilson. I just bumped into him at the studio. I hadn't seen him for some time. I mean, I grew up with Brian, or I should say Brian grew up with me, and
right.
He used to almost live at my house in the Hollywood Hills. And that, again, is another entire book. And Brian was down here recently. Well, I don't go to these venues because I've learned that when I do go to a venue of maybe from 150 to 10,000 people, when I'm asked to make a personal appearance, that's fun for me, and they pay me well, and they send a car for me, and on and on and on. And I'm treated like royalty. But the problem is, like my dear sweet lady, my gal pal, Alice says, "Honey, you don't realize every time you walk into one of those venues, you're walking into a human petri dish. And because a week later, you've been incubating something, and then you come down with a bad cold or practically pneumonia. Because thousands of people have been breathing all over you, and you're catching what's going on, the illness of the day, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And so I've tried not to do that anymore. I recently went to see, Alice and I went to see Art Garfunkel, who was at one of the venues down there. And Art is just one of the sweetest guys in the world. I did his first album with him after he, unfortunately, to break up with Paul, and we were doing all the Simon Garfunkel stuff. They had all the money in the world. They didn't have to work, but Artie loves to work. He loves to sing. He loves his poetry and his prose. And he's a very esoteric type guy, and we went to meet him. And it was wonderful, and yet I felt like, I wonder what's going to happen a couple of days from now. I'm going to be sick. Well, I actually came through it okay. But some of that is my age. I'm not a kid anymore. And all I hear about is, it's either the little infants or the elderly that get so sick, and they're absolutely right on. So there I am.
No, I want to go. Can you talk about the opportunity of playing in burlesque clubs? Because I have a feeling that what was cool is that the cats that were going there weren't coming to see you play, so you could just call out a tune and then riff over that, some 20-minute jam. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? Like,
absolutely. One of the things that not only I, but many drummers in the Chicago area, we were all attending the Roy Knapp Institute of Percussion.
Right.
There were over 500 of us going to that school, including people like Gene Krupa went to that school. The guy that came out with
did Dick Shorey? Did you know Dick Shorey?
I know that name,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, well, no, he was a big percussion guy. He was one of the early cats on Ovation Records out of Chicago with Gary Burton, but he was always experimenting with percussion. Kenny Malone was another great drummer, and a great drummer, too.
But I was studying with oh God, what was her name? Margie Heims. Mm-hmm. Studying vibes. I was minoring piano, minoring in voice. I was singing. I mean, I was getting all of this training in these strip joints because what better basic training every night? Now, keep in mind, we're talking about a 3-piece band: piano, drums, trumpet, sometimes saxophone instead of trumpet. And
wait, hold on. Just before you go on, you're talking.
Sure.
The pianist was playing the bass lines.
The piano was just playing piano. There was no bass player. The trumpet player. I mean, we had arrangements that were put in front of us, 12 to 15 different girls a night.
Oh my God! Okay, just continue on, please.
And so in my mind, I was playing big band arrangements behind these girls, not to show off my drums, but accompanying these girls. And these girls knew that they just worked at another place that had a 15-piece band. So now they're coming into a little 3-piece nothing, and they're thinking, what is this going to be like? And, you know, they all have the standard dances, slow, medium, fast, and off. And the comedian comes out. I mean, it was and once again, it's a book in itself. These guys used to come to me and say, you know, what you're doing for me behind me is just wonderful. I love it. I said, well, I don't know. It's what I feel. You know, I'm reading your part. And all of the basic training that we were getting, especially for drummers, was reading these drum parts that these gals had, where you had to do a rim shot here, a ba-doom here, or whatever. Tom-toms, Indian music, music from India. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff that most drummers forget about.
You know, you just sparked my... I've seen you on these, exactly, when the sitar was coming over and Ravi Shankar, and you're telling me that naturally, polyrhythms, how did you deal with it? Was just, you fit right in, just played them? I mean, I'd love to know how you... Somehow...
Thank God, somehow it was
you did a good job, man.
I'd seen enough of it, knew enough. You know, one of the great things that ever happened to me, I was not in a movie, but I was working on a soundtrack at Universal one day, and I didn't know who the producer was, and Universal was one of the few studios, talk about cheap guys. They never wanted to pay the proper monies, on and on and on and on. They always did, because it was all union. But the producers said, one of the things that happened was that most drummers, guitarists, pianists, they had cartage companies that delivered their instruments. But except for Universal, they had a room in the back room of the studio with every conceivable instrument. Mm-hmm. So when you came... I mean, in my case, I was using my monster set that I designed. They had to accept that. So, you know, I had a drum tech that was doing all this work for me. He was always one set in front of me, one set behind me with a particular setup, knowing what I would be doing, whether it was a movie, a television, a pilot, a recording, whatever it was. And in this case... this producer, and we were always behind barriers. The drummer, they had a booth called the Shelly Man booth, so that the drums, the leakage wasn't too bad when they were doing what they're doing. And now the percussionists were behind, it looked like the Great Wall of China. We were behind all these barriers so that we didn't leak into the orchestra in front of us. And at producer came, and he came back to talk to me, and he said, look, drummer, there's a scene coming up, and these people are in downtown India somewhere. It wasn't Bangkok. Oh God, what was this?
New Delhi or
one of those.
Yeah, right.
One of those New Delhis. And I told him, as a matter of fact, I used the old joke that I always use. I said, have you been to that New Delhi? Anyway.
Yeah.
Bada boom. So he said, listen, drummer, there's a scene coming up where these people are on, and they were on, like, not camels, but the thing that the Japanese and the Chinese used to do. They'd run with people behind them in a two-wheel thing.
Oh, yeah. Kangaroo. No, not kangaroos. I don't know, man. I don't know. I should know this,
Well,
too.
you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
right.
So the guy said, there's a guy and a girl, and they're going to be in this pushcart thing that you're pulling, and we're going to do some music of India. So be sure that you have some of those Indian drums. I said, okay. And we were on a break or whatever, and I went into the music room, and that's the one thing they did not have, tablas. There were no tablas. There were all kinds of other stuff. Now, I can take a drum and make it sound like anything. I don't care what. Because of my, past experiences. And Ravi Shankar was a perfect example of Alaraka, who was his tablaist.
That's right.
And after we did the Monterey Pop Festival, the first major music festival, Alaraka came to me and said, would you consider doing an album with me? I said, of course, I'd love to.
Wow.
And I did. It was great.
Wait, hold on. But what was that? I don't know that album. What album was that?
Well, I couldn't tell you the name of it offhand, but it was Alaraka.
Yeah.
I'm sure his son would know, because his son has a school now in California, somewhere up north.
Alaraka, Zakir Hussain is his son.
But Alaraka was the tablaist and an incredible player for Ravi Shankar.
But when he went up to you, do you remember if you just played Indian percussion, or did you play trap set on that album with him?
No, I played drums. I played regular drums. He wanted a rock drummer.
Unbelievable. Can you give me a basic?
Yeah, it really was.
Woo, that is a great story, Blaine. Holy cow.
So I have to tell you the story. So this producer tells me that they're going to be doing, they're doing this scene, and I couldn't find any tablas. So what did I do? Because of my past experiences, I took a big kind of a handkerchief and put it over my small tom-tom. I loosened the head a little bit, and I just got kind of a thuddy sound, and then I could raise the handkerchief at times and hit the drum with a dur, and here I'm hitting didgeridoo, and I'm using my fingers and one stick, and I'm playing all this, what I thought was Indian music, while the band was playing what they were playing. And when we finished the scene, it was one take, and when we finished the scene, the producer said, don't leave the drums, I have to talk to you. So I thought, oh, Jesus, I'm in trouble. I must have really screwed up. And this guy came running out, and he said, Hal, he knew my name. He said, and because he was calling me drummer, he said, Hal, that's the best tabla work I've ever heard. And it just made the scene, it was perfect.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So it's just experience, And I try to tell kids sometimes. I mean, one of my dearest friends is a fellow by the name of John Schwartz. Now, you may not know the name, but he goes under the name Bermuda Shorts. and John Schwartz happens to be the drummer for Weird Al Yankovic.
Oh, man.
And they do all of these takeoffs on former hits. And Bermuda has something like 35 snare drums. And he takes them to every session. I mean, the company delivers them. And he just had a set of monsters made, just like mine, exactly like mine. He sent me the pictures.
But here's the thing. You talk to kids about experience, but are you able to direct these kids in this time that we're living through when it's so fundamentally different than how you got your experience? I mean, what are your...
The thing is, you must remember
that
I was growing up in it. I have now passed that stage.
Right.
I mean, kids have heard me on record. I'll sit down and say it when I do a clinic. I don't care if there's 100 or 10,000. I've said before. I'll sit down at the drums and play the feel. They'll ask me about Maccas Park. How did you go from this tempo to this tempo? And it was a trilogy. I said, it's experience. We did it in one take, believe it or not.
No, I know. You got the charts. If you even got them 20 minutes before, you had to swing your ass off and do it.
No, not Maccas Park. Maccas Park, we practiced for an entire day.
And then one take, and it was done.
And then did one take,
yeah, right.
But we went from tempo to tempo to tempo, but it was like falling off of, eating a piece of cake. And we just had that experience of Joe Osborne and I and Larry Neckel.
You sure?
My God, we could, they called us the Hollywood Golden Trio because everything we touched became such major hits, everything. And that's why the producers came from literally all over the world, South America, from everywhere. And we did records for all these people because they wanted the Wrecking Crew. They'd heard about the Wrecking Crew. They heard of these American records by somebody talking about the Wrecking Crew. They didn't mention names. I remember I got a call from France one time, and I had been working with Tula Clark, who was very proficient in French, and she was married to a Frenchman, and she was such a superstar in Paris, and there was some producer in Paris that heard about me and the Wrecking Crew and he was coming to America, and I got to tell you, the crew we were booked months in advance, as much as 90 days in 2 months in advance. People were coming, and if they couldn't get us, they would book, the next month or the next month. Anyway, there was a Frenchman, wish I could remember his name, singer, excellent singer. It happened to me twice. Once with a fellow by the name of Alain Delon, and I remember him because he was a great actor and a good singer. We did that, and we did this other album that we did. These people that came in, they wouldn't even talk to anybody else except me. I mean, it was as if I was this great arranger or something.
Sure.
And there was nothing like that. And I tried to tell them, I said, the band that you hired out of the Wrecking Crew, well, they were all great players, but the guy that really gave us the best credits was John Denver. He always said that the guys in the band produced their own parts.
Right.
He never went into any of that baloney of I got to be honest with you, I've seen producers doing crossword puzzles in the booth, not even hearing us. And the other saying, how's that for you, John? And they say, oh, yeah, well, that's fine. If it works for you, sure, that's great. And these guys are taking home hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, we're taking home, double scale.
Yeah, it's you really just nailed it in the sense that, okay, I have a story for you.
Sure.
Terry Gibbs, I did an interview with Terry, And he came to California as a percussionist, did not like...
Kubianco.
Hold on, you're going to love this story.
Kubianco was one of my dear friends, still is. I think he's still with us.
Who?
Terry.
Oh, absolutely. No, this is great.
Yeah.
He told me a story about you. So, it's great. He really, the studio thing wasn't for him for this very reason, because you're putting your heart and soul into this stuff, and you got schmucks that are like, he just didn't dig the studio scene, and he wanted to do his own thing. He said the one time he did any studio work was for Phil Spector, and the album happened to be a John Lennon album, and Spector kept calling him up and saying, Terry Gibbs, the Steve Allen Show,
Right,
okay,
right.
All right, and Frankie Cap, which was his drummer, was down there, and he kept saying they're going to give us 10 doubles. 10 doubles, right, Blaine? 10 doubles, right? So 10 doubles. And so he gets down there, and he's playing this tune, and, it's not a sophisticated tune. Like you said, the jazzers, they really only listen to jazz, but, to him it was take 49, take 85. So it gets to take 85. It's John Lennon. He's got like 9 Japanese girls around him. Blaine's there hanging out. It's a party, obviously. And it's 4 a.m. And you finally finish do a rap, and Spector comes out with his gun, starts shooting it off, and Gibbs got freaked out and dove under a table, okay, because he's not used to it. And you come over, look under the table, say, Terry, come on out, brother. This happens all the time.
Well, I hate to burst the bubble, but that never happened. I spent 33 years with Phil Spector. Never once saw a gun. 33 years. All of the talk about the gun, it's all BS. Even the guy, the kid from the Ramones, who at one point said, Phil Spector stuck a gun in our face and said, you're going to sign with me or you'll hear it from my gun, or something like that. Even he said, before he passed away, he said that was all publicity BS.
So let's go. This is very important. I want to go back for a minute, because I just transcribed this story, and I thought when Terry, I have to go back and listen to it again. I thought Terry said he shot off a pop gun, which scared Terry and dove under the table. Then when I put the transcription up online, Terry said, no, it was a real gun. And you're saying no to that. You're saying that was never the case.
Well, let me explain one thing to you.
Go ahead.
When we were doing John Lennon, that was Cutler and I, double drums.
Double drums.
When we were doing John Lennon, he was a sweetheart of a guy when he's sober, but he was, he was getting crazy. When he used to come in with the biggest bottle of, I guess it was gin. It looked like an advertised bottle that you would see in the window of a liquor store. It looked like 5 gallons. I'm serious.
I believe you, man.
And halfway through the session, half of that 5 gallons was gone. And it's just, I can't tell you the stories, the horror stories.
Yeah.
But at one point, what happened was that something happened. The air conditioner unit got kicked off of the wall, that you set the program. It got kicked off the wall, and we were told to leave A&M Records because of that, what happened. And so we had to go over to West L.A. Oh, God, I just lost the name of the studio. Very famous studio over there.
Yes. Record plant or something?
Say again?
The record plant?
The record plant. No, wait. Was it the record plant?
I love Hal Blaine. Yeah, okay, no.
Anyway, this is an amazing story.
All right, go ahead.
And I didn't witness it, but everyone talked about it. At one point, we were on a 5-minute break. Now, if I was to tell you some of the 5-minute break stories that I witnessed, your hair would curl. at this one particular point, for some reason, I was not there, and I can't verify it. But there is up in the ceiling, there is a frame around the hole with a sign that says Phil Spector's gun did this. Now, when I finally heard the real story, and maybe Kepler would know, maybe, I just don't know. The real story was that, God, forgive me, the kid that wrote all the black piano player.
Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder came in, he wanted to meet John Lennon, or maybe had met him once or something. I don't know. So Stevie was sitting at the piano, and John Lennon, I don't even know if I can tell the story.
Don't worry about it. I just want to be clear that I mean, this is important to me because I've gotten some flack in the transcription because I'm pretty sure Terry said it was a pop gun. And then he made it very clear, no, Jake, it was a real gun, almost saying, I don't want to come across as a sissy for diving under a table with a pop gun. He says it's a real gun. You're saying he never used a real gun. That's all I really care about because at the end of the day, you know, you mix it with, you say like, okay, he never used a real gun, but yet there was mayhem at times at A&M Studios. People are kicking things off the walls. And there was an element of anarchy there. I think that was the point of the story, was just Lennon dove into a big birthday cake that Spector had made for him. You know, it was at 4 a.m, Hal. I mean, it's like fairy tales. It doesn't seem real, and the fact that you can't remember something like that it doesn't matter. It's important for history, basically, because I want to make sure that it was very cute.
Well, the point is...
But, I mean, you never went under a table and said to Terry Gibbs, this happens all the time.
Not that I could ever remember.
Okay. Well, I didn't want...
I could ever remember. Right. Terry and I were on the Steve Allen, the comedy special show.
Oh, I love
the Sunday night CBS show. I got film somewhere of me with Steve Allen doing bada booms, on stage. It was one of the great... Terry had one of the great bands, the Steve Allen Show, at CBS. And we were good friends. I mean, I love Terry. We're from different tribes, but we're fellow Jews. And he was just a great, funny guy, and he's just a terrific player, and on and on and on and on. Right.
No, it's really... I want to ask you about one cat that you played with, and, again, epitomized this concept of merely just music, no labels, because I've seen you guys. It just jumped into my head here. I have to believe one of the producers that recognized you for your diversity was Dick Bach. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely.
Dick Bach, to me, because I found an album several months back playing a 12-string guitar and banjo. And I forget who the two cats were. It was on Pacific Jazz. The rhythm section was Bond and Blaine. It was like
wasn't Dick with World Pacific?
World Pacific. Thank you. World Pacific. That then morphed to Pacific Jazz. It was World Pacific at that time. You and Bond were. So I mean, to me, it's like as we do part one here with Hal Blaine, and we've been talking Indian tablas, and now we're going to talk Little Bluegrass, which is just, to me, it's like. Those are labels that were not even there when you were making these albums.
Well, the thing is, I have to tell you about, for an example, World Pacific. We went in and we did an album with Buddy Rich. And Buddy produced an album of his daughter, Kathy. She was a singer. And the percussionist, God help me remember, one of the great players.
Francisco Aguabella? Were they like the Latin cats, or was it Milt Holland?
No, American cats.
Larry Bunker? Larry Bunker?
No, it wasn't Larry, and it wasn't Amo. It was one of the great and he's passed away.
He's an American cat?
Yeah.
Wow.
Did a lot of work with us. A lot of work.
Oh, it's got to come to you at some point. Anyway, go ahead, continue.
Anyway, the point is, this percussionist was very tight and grew up with Buddy Rich. And he went to Buddy and talked to him after we finished the album. It was a great album. And he came to me, and he said, I got to tell you this.
Was his name Jimmy Malyoun?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
He came to me and he said, Hal, I got to tell you this. He said, I went to Buddy, who's we're very tight friends. He said, Buddy, how come you didn't play on your kid's album? And Buddy said, I wanted the best. Now, to have Buddy Rich say something like that.
Wow.
I mean, what a compliment. And Buddy and I became good friends.
Oh, man, are you cool? That's fantastic. That's unreal.
Neighbors. I was on the back of my yacht, and he was up in the Marina City Towers in Marina Del Rey, where he spent the last of his life. I mean, these kind of things that they're one in a billion, to have happen to you. And I have had so many people send me stuff, Buddy Rich's stuff, because he was the greatest. I mean, there was nobody faster. But he was Mr. Rhythm when he was like 4 years old. I've seen those pictures of him on, in theaters. And this kid, Buddy Rich was Buddy Rich. He was just the greatest.
But when you say, let's just get it here, when you say he wanted the best, in my mind what that means is he wanted the guy with the most feeling. He wanted the most... Whatever
it was, that's exactly what he said to, this great percussionist. And he said, Hal, you got to know it, Buddy said. He wouldn't come to you and say this face to face to you, because I didn't know Buddy then. It's before I got to know him. But this is what he said. He said, well, how come you didn't play in your kid's album? Buddy said, I wanted the best. And that's it.
Do you feel like that like that you are able to attend and do you feel like those are places where you can kind of infuse this, like when he says I want the best, when I and that's whatever that is, whatever that means, do you feel like you have that ability to have an impact on youth in those kinds of settings, or do you feel inherently that music that swings there has to be a street element to it?
Well, it depends, because the word swings or swung, or if this cat swings or he don't swing. It's all relative to who you're talking to.
Sure.
It's just an amazing thing about, there's a particular person, and I won't mention the name, and they're one of these people who have turned on the Wrecking Crew, because there were times when that person was used. The person was a guitarist, and all of a sudden that person is out doing interviews today saying there never was a Wrecking Crew, that we were a group called the Click because we were jazz players, and when this particular person was forced to play Monkeys music, they wanted to vomit. This kind of shit is just crap, and that's all there is to it. Because this person never was a part of the Wrecking Crew. The Wrecking Crew consisted of 7 or 8 of us, the nucleus, and this particular person was never part of the Wrecking Crew. And this person is out there saying all these horrible, and they're nothing but lies. And it's a terrible thing because this person has played on every record since Edison invented the Victrola.
Why is he why is he so insecure? He's still not secure enough with himself?
Exactly. Because he or she is so full of crap, it's unbelievable. and has become the laugh of the industry. I mean, people just really laugh about it. So anyway, I won't go into all of that.
No. You know what? What I would like you to do, what I would like to ask you, could you name the 7 or 8 cats? I know that there's been a documentary, but obviously people are still out with access to grind. Can you just name the official Wrecking Crew?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
I mean, the Wrecking Crew was, of course, myself, Tommy Tedesco, Glenn Campbell, Ray Pullman, Bill Pittman, one of the great guitarists, Leon Russell was generally on piano with us. That's 6. And a couple more. Steve Douglas, the great chicken saxophone player, who became one of the producers at Capitol that brought in Bobby Darin and stuff like that, and when we got to play with Bobby. I think it was Jim Horn. Yeah, another one of the great saxophonists. And the other guy was Lou Blackburn.